The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the quiet cemetery that sprawled like a peaceful garden at the edge of town. Margaret, a frail woman in her late 70s, moved with purpose among the gravestones, her heart heavy with sorrow. Today marked the anniversary of her daughter Emily's death, a day that had become an annual pilgrimage for her. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and blooming daisies, a stark contrast to the emptiness she felt inside. As she reached Emily's grave, Margaret knelt down, her knees creaking in protest. She placed a bouquet of fresh wildflowers gently on the cold granite headstone, a small gesture of love that felt woefully inadequate given the depth of her loss. The engraving, "Beloved daughter and friend," sparked a cascade of memories that flooded her mind. She could almost hear Emily's laughter, sweet and melodic, echoing through the years. In her mind's eye, she could see Emily as a child, running through the fields, her hair dancing in the wind, full of life and dreams. "Oh, my darling," Margaret whispered, her voice trembling. "How I miss you." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wiped them away with the back of her hand. Time had not healed her wounds. It had only layered them with memories, some sweet, others tinged with regret. "I wish I could have done more for you," she murmured, her heart aching with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved feelings. Margaret sat down on a nearby bench, her gaze fixed on the grave. The tranquility of the cemetery surrounded her, but her mind was restless, swirling with thoughts of what could have been. If only she had been more understanding, more present in Emily's life. If only she had seen the signs of her struggles before it was too late. The guilt gnawed at her, a persistent reminder of her perceived failures. As she sat there, lost in thought, Margaret noticed a small figure a few yards away, crouched by Emily's grave. It was a young girl, perhaps 10 years old, with long, tangled hair that fell over her shoulders like a dark curtain. The girl was sobbing quietly, her small body shaking with the force of her tears. Margaret's heart twisted at the sight, a pang of concern mingling with her curiosity. Who was this child, and why was she grieving at her daughter's grave? Margaret stood up slowly, her joints protesting, and approached the girl with a gentle tread. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you all right?" The girl looked up, her tear-streaked face a picture of sorrow. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to disturb you. I just miss her so much." Margaret's heart ached at the girl's words. "You miss her?" she asked, kneeling down to the girl's level. "Do you know my daughter?" The girl nodded vigorously, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Her name was Emily, right? She was my friend." Her eyes, though filled with tears, sparkled with a strange intensity that made Margaret's heart race with confusion. "Your friend?" Margaret repeated, her mind racing. "I'm sorry, but I don't think I've ever seen you before. How do you know Emily?" The girl took a deep breath, her small shoulders shaking slightly as she tried to compose herself. "I used to play with her in the park," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "She was so nice to me. We would swing together and pick flowers. I came here to tell her I miss her." Margaret's heart twisted painfully at the mention of the park. Memories of Emily's childhood came flooding back. The laughter, the games, the innocent joys that had filled their lives before everything changed. "But Emily passed away a long time ago," she said, her voice trembling. "How could you have known her?" "I just did," the girl replied, her tone matter-of-fact despite her tear-stained cheeks. "She's always with me. She told me to come here today." Margaret's mind reeled. This girl, this stranger, spoke with a conviction that both intrigued and unsettled her. "What do you mean she's always with you?" she asked, a mixture of skepticism and hope threading through her words. The girl looked down at the ground, her fingers fidgeting with the grass. "She talks to me sometimes. I can feel her when I'm sad. She tells me things." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She told me to come here and take care of you." "Take care of me?" Margaret echoed, bewildered. "Why would she want you to do that?" "Because you're sad," the girl said simply, her expression earnest. "And she doesn't want you to be sad anymore." Margaret's heart swelled with a mix of emotions, grief, confusion, and an unexpected sense of comfort. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, trying to ground herself in the reality of the moment. Lily, the girl replied, a faint smile breaking through her tears. I come here often. I feel close to her here. Margaret studied Lily's face, searching for any sign of deception. There was none. The girl's sorrow felt genuine, and Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this encounter. Lily, she said slowly, would you like to sit with me for a moment? I'd love to hear more about your friendship with Emily. Lily nodded, her expression brightening. They both settled onto the bench, the weight of the moment hanging between them, like an invisible thread connecting their lives. Emily was the best, Lily began. She always had the best ideas for games. We used to pretend we were pirates sailing the seas. Margaret's heart warmed at the image, her mind painting a vivid picture of Emily's younger days, full of imagination and joy. Oh, she loved adventures, she said, a hint of a smile creeping onto her face. She was a dreamer. Yeah, Lily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. And she taught me how to find treasures in the grass. We would collect pretty rocks and leaves and pretend they were gold. Margaret chuckled softly, her heart swelling with nostalgia. She had a knack for making everything magical. But as she listened to Lily speak, a shadow of doubt crept in. How could this girl know so much about Emily? What kind of connection did they share? As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the cemetery, Margaret felt a strange sense of peace. Perhaps, just perhaps, this encounter was a sign, a reminder that Emily's spirit could still touch the lives of others, even in her absence. Thank you for sharing that with me, Lily, Margaret said, her voice softening. It means more than you know. Lily smiled, the light returning to her eyes. I just want you to be happy again, she said earnestly. Margaret nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude for this unexpected friendship. As the shadows lengthened and the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, she found herself hoping that maybe, just maybe, Lily held the key to unlocking some of the pain that had haunted her for so long. But as the evening breeze rustled the leaves around them, a lingering question remained in the air, teasing at the edges of her mind. What was the true nature of Lily's connection to Emily? And what secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of this mysterious encounter? Margaret sat on the weathered bench in the cemetery, the cool breeze brushing against her cheek, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced among the tombstones. She glanced at Lily, who was now seated beside her, her small hands resting in her lap, her gaze fixed on the ground. The girl had become a regular presence in Margaret's life. Over the past few days, a bright spot amidst the heavy clouds of grief that had settled around her since Emily's passing. Do you want to tell me another story about my daughter? Margaret asked gently, hoping to draw the girl out of her quietness. She had learned that Lily had a gift for storytelling, weaving tales that were both heartwarming and heartbreaking, each one revealing another piece of the puzzle that was Emily's life. Lily's head snapped up, her large, expressive eyes sparkling with a mix of sadness and excitement. Can I really? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course, Margaret encouraged, her heart swelling with a strange mix of affection and protectiveness. I love hearing about her. Lily smiled shyly, her cheeks dimpled. Okay, once when we were playing in the park, Emily showed me how to climb the tallest tree. She was so brave. I was scared, but she kept saying, "You can do it, Lily. Just trust me." Margaret felt a pang in her chest at the mention of the park. It was a place filled with memories, both joyous and painful. That sounds like her, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. She always had a way of making people feel brave. As Lily continued her story, painting vivid images of laughter and adventure, Margaret couldn't help but marvel at the girl's ability to recall such intricate details. How could a child so young have such a deep connection to her daughter? Questions swirled in her mind, but she pushed them aside, focusing instead on the warmth that Lily's words brought. We had so much fun that day, Lily continued, her eyes lighting up with the memory. But then, when we got to the top, I looked down and got scared again. Emily laughed and said, "Just look at the sky, isn't it beautiful?" So I closed my eyes and looked up. It felt like we were flying. Margaret's heart ached as she listened. She could almost see the scene unfold before her. The two girls, carefree and full of life, climbing high above the world, suspended in a moment of bliss. "I wish I could have seen that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily turned to her, her expression suddenly serious. "Why don't you go to the park, Miss Margaret? Maybe you can feel her there, like I do." The suggestion caught Margaret off guard. "You really think so?" she asked, her skepticism creeping back in. "Do you think she's still there?" Lily nodded, her innocence shining through. "I know she is. Sometimes I feel her with me, like a warm hug. It's like she's telling me to be happy and not to be sad." Margaret swallowed hard, the lump in her throat growing larger. Could it be possible that Emily was somehow still present, watching over them? It was a comforting thought, but also one that filled her with confusion. "I wish I could feel that too," she admitted. The conversation shifted, and Margaret found herself opening up in a way she hadn't in years. "You know, Lily, things weren't always easy between Emily and me," she confessed, her voice trembling. "We had our arguments, and I often regret the things I said." Lily leaned closer, her eyes wide with understanding. "It's okay to feel that way." I think she understood. Sometimes, people just get lost in their feelings. Margaret nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I just wish I could tell her how much I love her, how much I miss her." Lily reached out and took Margaret's hand, her small fingers wrapping around the older woman's. "You can still tell her. You can talk to her anytime. She's listening, I promise." Margaret felt a warmth spread through her chest at the girl's words. "Thank you, Lily," she said, squeezing the girl's hand gently. "You have a gift. You make me feel less alone." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the cemetery in a golden glow, Margaret found herself lost in thought. Could it be that this young girl, with her gentle spirit and uncanny knowledge of Emily, was a lifeline to the past? Or perhaps a reflection of her own long-buried emotions? She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Lily, something mysterious that lay just beneath the surface. In the following days, Margaret continued to meet with Lily, their bond deepening with each encounter. Each story the girls shared was like a thread weaving together their lives, filling in the gaps left by Emily's absence. Yet a lingering unease settled in Margaret's heart. It was as if she were standing on the edge of a chasm, peering into the darkness below, unsure of what she might find if she took a step forward. One afternoon, as they sat together beneath the sprawling branches of an old oak tree, Margaret felt compelled to voice her thoughts. "Lily, do you ever wonder where you come from? I mean, how do you know so much about Emily?" Lily looked up, her expression thoughtful. "I just feel it, I guess. Sometimes it's like memories that aren't mine, but belong to someone else." Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. "You mean you feel her memories?" "Yeah," Lily replied, her voice steady. "And sometimes I see her, like in my dreams. She's smiling and telling me things." "Things," Margaret pressed, her heart racing. "Like to take care of you," Lily said simply, "and that she loves you." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. "You see her in your dreams? What does she say?" Lily hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "She says it's okay to be sad, but also to find joy again. She wants you to be happy, Miss Margaret. She wants you to remember the good times." Margaret's heart swelled with emotion, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I want that too, Lily. I want to remember her the way she was, full of life and laughter." "Then let's do that together," Lily said, her voice firm yet gentle. "We can make new memories." As they sat in silence, the weight of unspoken words hung in the air. Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lily's connection with Emily than met the eye. She found herself pondering the girl's origins. Who was she really? Was she simply an imaginative child, or was there something deeper at play? Days turned into weeks, and as the seasons began to change, Margaret's visits to the cemetery became a cherished routine. Each encounter with Lily brought a mix of comfort and confusion, a reminder of the vibrant life that once was and the child who seemed to embody it. Yet even as she began to find solace in their friendship, Margaret couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something monumental. One afternoon, as they sat together in the cemetery, Lily's demeanor shifted. She turned to Margaret, her expression serious. "Miss Margaret, I have something to tell you." "What is it, dear?" Margaret asked, her heart quickening. "I've seen her," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily's spirit." Margaret's breath caught in her throat, and she felt the world around her fade into the background. "What do you mean?" she asked, a mix of skepticism and hope flooding her senses. "I see her sometimes when I'm here," Lily continued, her gaze drifting to the horizon. "She's always smiling, and she wants you to know she's okay. She wants you to be okay too." Margaret's heart raced. "You've seen her? Here? In this very spot?" Lily nodded, her expression earnest. "Yes, and she told me to tell you something." "Tell me, please," Margaret urged, her voice trembling. "She said you should forgive yourself," Lily replied, her words hanging in the air, heavy with meaning, "and that she loves you very much." In that moment, the walls Margaret had built around her heart began to crumble. The weight of years of grief and regret threatened to overwhelm her, but there was a flicker of hope igniting within her. Could it be possible that Emily was truly watching over her, guiding her toward healing? Torn between skepticism and longing, Margaret felt a tear slip down her cheek. "Thank you, Lily," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much that means to me." As they sat together in the fading light, Margaret realized that the journey ahead would not be easy, but it was one she was willing to take. With Lily by her side, perhaps she could finally start to mend the broken pieces of her heart, one story at a time. Margaret stood at the library entrance, her heart heavy with anticipation. She pushed the door open, the familiar scent of old paper and polished wood enveloping her like a warm embrace. The quiet hum of the library was comforting, a stark contrast to the turmoil of her thoughts. She had spent countless afternoons here during Emily's childhood, helping her with homework and encouraging her dreams. Today, however, she was on a mission, one that felt both necessary and daunting. As she made her way to the back corner where the local history section resided, Margaret couldn't shake the nagging sensation that she was being watched. Shaking off the feeling, she focused on the task at hand. She needed to find out more about Lily, the mysterious girl who claimed to be a friend of Emily. Margaret's mind raced with questions. Who was this girl? Why did she seem to know so much about Emily's life? And why had she been visiting Emily's grave? Margaret scanned the shelves, her fingers trailing along the spines of books that held the stories of her town, stories she had once known so well. She pulled a few volumes from the shelf, each filled with newspaper clippings and photographs, hoping to find some mention of Lily or her family. Hours passed, each minute feeling longer than the last. She sifted through articles about local events, obituaries, and school achievements, but there was no trace of the girl. Frustrated, Margaret took a break, sitting at a small table by the window. She glanced outside, watching the leaves swirl in the autumn breeze. Her thoughts drifted back to Emily, to the days when they would sit together in this very spot, laughing over stories and sharing dreams. But those days felt like a lifetime ago, overshadowed by grief and regret. "Margaret?" a familiar voice called, pulling her from her reverie. She turned to see Sarah, an old friend from the neighborhood, approaching with a warm smile. "Sarah, it's been ages," Margaret replied, her heart lifting just a bit. "Are you still digging through Old Town records?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Yes, I'm trying to find information about a girl named Lily. She's been visiting Emily's grave," Margaret explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah's expression shifted to one of concern. "I haven't heard of any Lily. Are you sure you're not imagining things? The grief can play tricks on the mind, you know." Margaret felt a pang of frustration at Sarah's words, but she understood the concern. "I thought so too at first, but she knows things only someone close to Emily would know." "Maybe it's a childhood fantasy," Sarah suggested gently. "Emily had a vivid imagination." "I thought the same," Margaret said, her voice firm. "But it feels so real, Sarah. I need to know the truth." Sarah nodded, her expression softening. "If you want, I can help. I have some old contacts who might remember something about Emily's childhood. She had a friend back then, didn't she?" Margaret's heart raced at the mention of a friend. "Yes, she did. A girl from the neighborhood. Do you think they could have seen something?" "Let's meet tomorrow at my house," I'll dig through my old photo albums, see if I can find anything, Sarah replied, her voice filled with determination. Thank you, Sarah. That would mean a lot, Margaret said, her heart swelling with gratitude. They parted ways, and Margaret left the library with a renewed sense of purpose. The following day at Sarah's house was filled with laughter and nostalgia as they sifted through dusty photo albums, flipping through pages filled with memories of a simpler time. Margaret felt a warmth in her chest as she recalled the carefree days of Emily's youth, but it was tinged with a sadness that had become all too familiar. Look at this one, Sarah said, pointing to a photograph of Emily with a group of children playing at a park. She was always the life of the party. Margaret smiled but then frowned as she noticed something strange. Who is that girl next to her? She asked, pointing to a girl with dark hair and bright eyes, a girl she didn't recognize. I don't know, Sarah admitted, her brow furrowing as she leaned in closer. Maybe one of her friends from school, or perhaps from the neighborhood. Margaret's heart raced. We need to find out who she is. Maybe she's connected to Lily somehow. As they continued to search through the albums, Margaret's mind drifted back to the stories Lily had shared. The details were vivid, almost haunting. It was as if the girl had stepped right out of the past, bringing memories with her that Margaret had buried deep within her heart. Later that afternoon, as they sat in Sarah's cozy living room, Margaret felt a chill sweep through her. What if this girl, this unknown friend, had something to do with Emily's later years? What if Lily is trying to tell me something? You're really convinced about this connection, aren't you? Sarah asked, her tone shifting from skepticism to concern. Yes, Margaret replied, her voice steady. I feel it in my bones. I need to know who this girl is. If there's even a chance she could provide answers, I can't ignore it. Let's ask around the neighborhood, Sarah suggested. Maybe some of the older folks might remember something from when the girls were young. Margaret nodded, determination flooding her veins. Let's do it. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, visits, and conversations with old neighbors. Each interaction was filled with a mixture of hope and disappointment. Many remembered Emily, her laughter, her energy, but when it came to the girl in the photograph, they were met with blank stares. Then, one afternoon, just as Margaret was beginning to lose hope, she received a call from Mrs. Thompson, an elderly neighbor who had known Emily well. Margaret, dear, I remember a girl, Mrs. Thompson said, her voice cracking with age. She lived just down the street from you. Such a sweet girl, always playing with Emily. I think her name was Anna. Anna? Margaret echoed, her heart racing again. Can you tell me more about her? Yes, I remember they were inseparable for a time. But then there was that terrible accident. Mrs. Thompson trailed off, her voice thick with emotion. What accident? Margaret pressed gently, her heart pounding. There was a fire at the old barn. Anna was hurt badly, and Emily, well, you know how she was after that. Mrs. Thompson said, her voice barely a whisper. It changed everything. Margaret felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Changed everything? How? The girls drifted apart, Margaret. Emily blamed herself for what happened. It was all so tragic. I think it haunted her for years. Margaret's mind reeled. She had never known the full story of the accident. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together in her mind, she felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a yearning to understand the truth. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate you sharing this with me, Margaret said, her voice trembling. After hanging up, Margaret sat in silence, processing the revelations. The weight of her daughter's past loomed over her like a dark cloud. She knew she needed to confront these memories, to find out if Lily was indeed connected to Anna, and to understand the truth about the accident that had seemingly altered the course of Emily's life. Determined, she made her way to the cemetery once again, her heart racing as she approached Emily's grave. She needed answers, and she had to confront Lily about what she had learned. As she knelt beside the gravestone, a sense of foreboding washed over her. Would the truth bring her peace, or would it only deepen the wounds of her past? Emily, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm trying to understand. I need to know what happened. Please, help me find the answers. As she spoke, a rustle caught her attention. She turned to see Lily standing a few feet away, her small figure silhouetted against the autumn sky. The girl's expression was serious, her eyes brimming with a depth that belied her young age. "Lily," Margaret called, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you. There's something we need to discuss." The girl approached slowly, her gaze steady. "You found out about Anna, didn't you?" Margaret's heart raced at the mention of the name. "Yes. How did you know?" Lily took a deep breath, her small shoulders rising and falling. "I've seen her. I've seen Anna. She's hurting, Margaret. She wants you to know the truth." Margaret's mind spun as she processed Lily's words. "The truth? What truth? What happened back then?" Lily looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated, but I can help you understand. Just trust me." With those words hanging in the air, Margaret felt a flicker of hope intermingled with fear. She had spent so long running from the past, but now it seemed the past was ready to confront her. And perhaps, just perhaps, Lily was the key to unlocking the mysteries that had haunted their lives for so long. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, the lingering scent of freshly brewed tea mingling with the musty aroma of old books. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the surface where she had laid out an assortment of photo albums. Her heart raced with a mix of anticipation and dread as she prepared to welcome Lily into her home. The girl had become a curious fixture in her life, a beacon of light amidst her enveloping sorrow. When the doorbell rang, Margaret's hands trembled slightly as she set down her teacup. She opened the door to find Lily standing there, her small frame silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun. The girl's big, expressive eyes sparkled with an innocent energy that contrasted sharply with the weight of the secrets they had begun to unravel together. "Hi, Margaret," Lily chirped, her voice bright and cheerful. "I'm excited to see your pictures." "Come in, dear," Margaret replied, stepping aside to let her enter. "I have a lot to show you." They settled at the table, surrounded by the remnants of Margaret's past, photographs yellowed with age, each capturing a moment of joy, love, and sometimes heartache. As they flipped through the albums, Margaret narrated stories of Emily's childhood, her laughter, her dreams, and the bond they had shared before life had taken a tragic turn. "Here," Margaret said, pointing to a photograph of Emily at the park, her hair blowing in the wind, a beaming smile lighting up her face. This was tacking on her 7th birthday. She had a party at the park and all her friends came. She was so happy that day. Lily leaned in closer, her finger tracing the outline of Emily's face in the picture. "She looks really happy," she said, a hint of nostalgia in her voice. "I can feel it." Margaret's heart ached at the sight of Lily's innocent admiration for her daughter. "Yes, she was," Margaret replied softly, "but there were some things, some moments, that changed everything." As they continued to sift through the albums, Lily's attention was caught by a picture that Margaret had nearly forgotten. It was a snapshot of Emily with another little girl, one Margaret didn't recognize immediately. The girl had dark hair tied in pigtails and a mischievous grin that seemed to leap from the page. "Who is she?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the picture held a secret. Margaret squinted at the photograph, her brow furrowing in concentration. I don't remember her name," she admitted, the memories swirling in her mind, elusive and slippery. "But I know they were inseparable for a time. I think her family moved away shortly after that." Lily's gaze was intense, her small fingers brushing over the photograph as if she were trying to summon the girl back to life. "She looks like she was a lot of fun," Lily commented, her tone heavy with an emotion Margaret couldn't quite place. "Do you remember what happened to her?" Margaret felt a chill creep down her spine. The girl in the photograph was a ghost of a memory, tied to a tragic event she had tried to bury deep within her. "There was an accident at the park, the day Emily and I were supposed to go there for a picnic." Her voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of guilt and regret rising within her. As Margaret recounted the day of the accident, her mind wandered back to that fateful afternoon. She had been preparing sandwiches, the sun shining brightly outside, when she received the call. Emily had been playing with her friend, laughing and running through the grass, but in a moment of chaos, everything had changed. A child had been hurt, and in the aftermath, it had left an indelible mark on their family. Lily listened intently, her expression shifting from curiosity to something deeper, more profound. "What happened to the girl?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. She didn't survive," Margaret replied, her heart clenching painfully at the memory. "Emily was devastated. She believed it was her fault. I tried to comfort her, but I was grieving too. I didn't know how to help her through it." Margaret's eyes shimmered with tears as she recalled the turmoil of that time. The days that followed were filled with silence and unspoken words, the rift between mother and daughter widening with every passing moment. Guilt gnawed at Margaret, whispering that she could have done more, should have said more. "I'm so sorry, Margaret," Lily said softly, her voice laced with empathy. "That must have been really hard for you both." "Yes, it was," Margaret sighed, wiping away a tear that had escaped her control. "But it's been years now. I thought I had moved on. I thought I had buried the past." Lily looked up at her eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed beyond her years. "Sometimes the past doesn't want to be buried," she said. "It wants to be remembered." Margaret nodded slowly, the truth of Lily's words resonating within her. She felt a strange connection to this little girl, as if the bond they were forming was reaching beyond the limits of time and space. "You're wise for your age, Lily," she said, a faint smile breaking through her sadness. "What do you think we should do?" Lily's expression shifted suddenly, her gaze becoming distant as if she were peering into a world that was invisible to Margaret. "We should go to the park," she said decisively, her voice carrying an undercurrent of urgency. "We need to find her." Margaret felt a surge of apprehension. "Find who, dear?" "The girl in the picture," Lily said, her voice firm. "She's still there, waiting. We need to remember her." Margaret's heart raced. Could it be possible? Could they reach into the past and somehow bring closure to a tragedy that had haunted her for so long? "You really believe that?" she asked, half skeptical, half hopeful. "Yes," Lily replied, her eyes shining with conviction. "And I think Emily would want us to." After a moment of contemplation, Margaret found herself nodding. There was something undeniably compelling about Lily's belief, and the thought of confronting the past felt daunting, yet liberating. "All right, let's go to the park, but we'll need to prepare ourselves for whatever we might find." The two of them made their way to the park, the air thick with anticipation. As they approached the familiar entrance, Margaret felt a wave of emotions wash over her. The laughter of children, the rustling leaves, and the echoes of a day-long past. The park was alive with sounds that had once filled her heart with joy. As they stepped onto the playground, Margaret couldn't help but notice how time had changed the landscape. The swings creaked in the breeze, and the slide gleamed under the sun. But the laughter that once filled this space was now only a memory. "Where do we start?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling slightly. Lily closed her eyes, her expression serene as if she were tuning into something beyond Margaret's comprehension. "We start where it all happened," she said, opening her eyes and pointing toward a small clearing at the edge of the park. They walked together, Margaret's heart pounding in her chest as they neared the spot. Memories flooded her mind, Emily's laughter mingling with the sounds of children playing, the carefree innocence of youth now dulled by the shadows of tragedy. As they reached the area, Lily knelt down, her fingers tracing the grass as if trying to unearth something buried deep within. "This is where it happened," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Margaret felt her breath hitch in her throat. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "This is where everything changed." The weight of the moment pressed down upon her, and she found herself closing her eyes, recalling every detail of that fateful day. The sun shining, the laughter, and then the silence that had followed. She opened her eyes to find Lily staring intently at the ground, her expression a mixture of sorrow and determination. "Tell her we remember," Lily said suddenly, her voice soft but firm. "Tell her she's not forgotten." Margaret felt a surge of emotions, grief, guilt, and an overwhelming desire for closure. She knelt beside Lily, her heart racing as she spoke into the stillness of the park. "I remember you," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry for what happened. I thought I could protect my daughter, but I failed you both." As she spoke, Margaret felt a strange warmth envelop her, a sense of release as if the weight of the past was beginning to lift. She looked at Lily, who was now gazing at her with an intensity that both comforted and unnerved her. "Do you feel that?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Margaret nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and confusion. "Yes," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I feel something." But just as the moment felt charged with possibility, Lily's expression shifted. She looked around, her eyes wide with fear. "Something's not right," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to go back, Margaret. Now!" Margaret felt a chill run down her spine, and as she looked around the park, the air seemed to grow heavy, oppressive. The laughter that had once echoed here felt distant, replaced by an unsettling silence that sent shivers through her. "What's happening, Lily?" Margaret asked, her heart. Margaret sat on a weathered bench in the cemetery, her heart pounding with the weight of revelation. The sunlight filtered through the branches of the surrounding trees, casting dappled shadows across the grass. She glanced over at Lily, who sat cross-legged on the ground, her head bowed, the curls of her hair framing her face like a halo. The girl had just dropped a bombshell that shook the very foundation of Margaret's understanding of loss, grief, and the connections that bind the living and the dead. "Are you all right, Margaret?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper, yet laced with a maturity that belied her young age. "You look like you're thinking really hard." Margaret took a deep breath, trying to collect her thoughts. "I'm just trying to understand," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You're saying you're the girl from the accident? The one who—" She hesitated, the memories flooding her mind, the frantic calls for help, the horror of that day, the way it had shattered their family. "You died, Lily. You were supposed to be gone." Lily looked up, her eyes reflecting an understanding beyond her years. "I was lost for a long time," she said, her voice steady. "But I came back. Emily and I were meant to be friends, and I think we're still connected somehow. I can feel her, even when she's not here." Margaret's heart ached at the thought. "But why? Why come back now? Why to me?" The questions tumbled from her lips, each one laden with desperation and confusion. "Because you need to heal, Margaret. You've been carrying so much pain. It's heavy. I can help you," Lily said, her eyes earnest, glistening with unshed tears. "We can hold a memorial for both of us, a way to say goodbye, to forgive each other." The idea struck Margaret like a bolt of lightning. A memorial. It seemed so simple, yet it felt monumental. Could this child, who claimed to be the spirit of her daughter's unfortunate friend, truly help her find closure? "You really think that would help?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," Lily nodded vigorously. "I know it will. It's like a bridge, Margaret. A way to cross over from all the sadness to happiness again." Margaret closed her eyes, envisioning the day they would gather. "All right," she finally said, her voice steadier. "Let's do it. Let's hold a memorial for both you and Emily." As they planned, Margaret felt a strange sense of purpose igniting within her. The thought of letting go of the grief that had clung to her for years was both terrifying and liberating. Days passed as they prepared, Margaret gathering flowers, candles, and small mementos that represented her daughter's vibrant spirit, while Lily contributed her own drawings and trinkets, artifacts from a life she claimed had been intertwined with Emily's. On the day of the memorial, the air was thick with anticipation. Margaret arrived early, her heart racing as she set up the small altar under the sprawling oak tree near Emily's grave. She arranged the flowers in a circular pattern, placed the candles around them, and laid out the items that spoke of Emily's laughter and joy. Her favorite book, a worn teddy bear, and a locket with a photograph of her smiling. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the cemetery, Margaret took a moment to collect herself. The scent of fresh flowers mixed with the earthy aroma of the ground beneath her feet. She felt the weight of the past pressing down, but alongside it emerged a flicker of hope. Lily arrived, her small hands clutching a handful of daisies. "These are for Emily," she smiled, her eyes sparkling. "She loved these." Margaret returned the smile, albeit nervously. "Thank you, Lily. They're perfect." They stood together in silence for a moment, the gravity of the occasion settling around them like a thick fog. "Are you ready?" Lily asked, her voice soft yet firm. Margaret nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, I think so." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Let's begin. As they lit the candles, Margaret felt tears welling up in her eyes. Emily, she began, her voice cracking with emotion. I have carried your memory with me every day since you left. I've missed you so much. I regret the things I didn't say, the moments we lost. I wish I could take them back. Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word a weight lifted from her heart. Lily, standing beside her, clasped her hands together. Emily, you were my friend, she said, her tone sincere. I wanted to be with you. I missed our adventures even though I was gone. I want you to know that I forgive you. I know it wasn't your fault. Her small voice echoed in the stillness of the cemetery. Margaret turned to Lily, the child's words striking a chord deep within her. Forgiveness, she whispered, the word tasting foreign on her tongue. Can we really forgive ourselves? Yes, Lily replied, her gaze unwavering. It's the most important part of healing. We have to let go of the past. Otherwise, we stay trapped. Margaret nodded slowly, feeling a mixture of sorrow and relief wash over her. I've been trapped for so long. She reached for Lily's hand, and the two of them stood together, united in this moment of remembrance. I want to let go, for both of you. As they shared stories, the sun set behind them, casting long shadows over the graves. Margaret spoke of Emily's childhood dreams, her laughter, and the plans they had made together. She spoke of the love that had always been there, buried beneath the layers of grief and regret. Lily listened intently, her eyes glistening. She would have loved to hear all of this, she said softly, placing a daisy on the altar. She was special, just like you. Margaret felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a gentle reminder that love transcends even the darkest moments. Thank you, Lily, she said, her voice filled with gratitude, for helping me remember that. As the last light of day faded, they stood in silence, feeling a sense of peace enveloping them. Margaret closed her eyes, allowing the weight of the years to slip away, if only for a moment. She could almost hear Emily's laughter in the breeze, a whisper of the bond they had shared. Finally, as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Margaret felt a deep sense of closure wash over her. She had shared her pain, her regrets, and now she could begin to heal. I will always carry you in my heart, Emily, she whispered into the night, and now I can finally let you go. Lily smiled, her small face glowing with understanding. You did good, Margaret. You're stronger than you think. Margaret turned to the young girl beside her, her heart swelling with a mixture of sadness and hope. Thank you, Lily. You've given me a gift I never expected to receive. As they stood together, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves above them, and for the first time in years, Margaret felt a flicker of peace settle within her soul. The past was still there, but it no longer held her captive. With Lily by her side, she had taken the first steps toward healing, and for that, she would be eternally grateful. Margaret sat on a weathered bench, the sun casting long shadows across the cemetery. The air was heavy with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint aroma of blooming flowers, yet her heart felt as if it were wrapped in layers of fog. Just moments ago, she had experienced a semblance of peace, a flicker of hope ignited by the memorial she had shared with Lily. But now that flicker was threatened by the girl's sudden distress. Lily, what is it? Margaret's voice trembled as she reached for the child's small hand, hoping to anchor her in that moment. Lily's eyes darted around, wide with an emotion that Margaret could only describe as fear. I think Emily is trying to tell us something, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I can feel her. It's like she's here, but I can't see her. Margaret's heart raced, a chill creeping down her spine. Could it be true? All the stories Lily had shared about her connection with Emily, the memories both poignant and painful, began swirling in her mind. What does she want? Margaret asked, her voice shaking. I don't know, Lily replied, her brow furrowing in concentration. But I can sense she's worried. The idea that Emily's spirit lingered nearby filled Margaret with a mix of dread and longing. Worried about what? She pressed, trying to keep her voice steady. About us, Lily said with a hint of urgency. About you, Margaret. You need to understand. She's been waiting for someone to listen. Margaret felt tears prick at her eyes, the weight of grief and unresolved feelings pressing heavily on her chest. "I've spent so long regretting our last conversations," she confessed. "I never got to say goodbye. I... She knows," Lily interrupted softly, her voice laced with a comforting warmth. "She knows everything. She understands why things happened the way they did." Margaret swallowed hard, a lump forming in her throat. "But how can you know that? You're just a child. You shouldn't have to bear this weight." "I've lived many lives," Lily said, her gaze steady and profound. "Each time, I've learned something. About love, about loss. Emily is a part of me, and I'm a part of her." Margaret blinked, trying to process the enormity of Lily's words. "What do you mean you've lived many lives?" Lily took a deep breath, her small frame seeming to expand with the weight of her revelation. "I've been here before. I've known Emily before. We were friends in another time, another life. I feel drawn to her, to this place, like a thread tying us together." Margaret's mind raced. Was this little girl truly claiming to be some reincarnation of a friendship that had long since been severed? She looked into Lily's deep, soulful eyes, searching for the truth. "Are you saying you knew her as a child? That you were—" "Yes," Lily said, nodding earnestly. "I was the girl who played with her in the park, the one who died." A heavy silence enveloped them as Margaret grappled with the implications. The tragedy that had haunted her family for so many years, the accident that had driven a wedge between her and Emily, now seemed to be tied to this mysterious child sitting beside her. "Lily," Margaret began, her voice trembling, "if that's true, if you were that girl, how can you be here now? Why are you still alive?" "Because I chose to come back," Lily explained, her expression serene yet intense. "I've come to help heal the hurt, to bring peace to you both. Emily has been lost, trapped in her sorrow, and I can help her find her way." Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she absorbed Lily's words. "But what if she doesn't want to let go? What if she's still angry with me for what happened?" "She isn't angry," Lily said softly. "She just wants to be understood. She wants you to forgive her, and for you to forgive yourself." Margaret felt an ache deep within her, one that had festered for years. The guilt of their last argument, the unkind words exchanged, the pain of never being able to mend their relationship. It all swirled around her, threatening to suffocate her. "But I can't just forget," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You don't have to forget," Lily reassured her. "You just have to remember the love, the joy, the laughter. Emily wants you to celebrate her life, not mourn her death." Margaret closed her eyes, envisioning the vibrant young woman Emily had been, the girl who danced in the rain, who spun stories of adventure, who had a smile that could light up the darkest room. "I wish I could have been there for her," she said, her voice barely audible. "I wish I had listened more." Lily squeezed her hand, her small fingers warm against Margaret's weathered skin. "You can still listen, Margaret. Not just to her, but to yourself. You've carried this pain for too long. It's time to let it go." Just then a rustling sound broke through the stillness of the cemetery. Margaret turned instinctively, her heart leaping into her throat. In the distance, a figure emerged, a woman, ethereal and familiar, her features hauntingly reminiscent of Emily. "Margaret!" Lily whispered, her eyes widening. "She's here!" Margaret felt frozen, unable to move or speak as the figure drew closer. The woman's hair flowed like golden silk, her face a perfect blend of youthful grace and solemn wisdom. Margaret's breath caught in her throat, a mix of disbelief and yearning flooding her senses. "Emily?" she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. The apparition paused, its gaze locking onto Margaret, a soft smile illuminating her features. "Mother," she breathed, her voice a melodic whisper that danced through the air. Margaret's heart shattered, a wave of emotions crashing over her. Relief, sorrow, love, and regret. "Is it really you?" she breathed, her voice thick with unshed tears. The figure nodded, her expression tender, yet filled with a deep understanding. "I've missed you, Mom. I've always been with you, even when we were apart." Lily's small hand slipped from Margaret's grasp. but the connection remained as the girl stepped back, allowing the two to reconnect in their shared sorrow and love. "Why didn't you tell me?" Margaret cried softly, her heart aching. "Why didn't you let me know you were still here?" "I wanted you to heal," Emily replied, her voice a gentle caress. "I wanted you to find your way back to the joy we shared. I never wanted you to feel this burden alone." As the words fell softly between them, Margaret felt layers of grief begin to peel away, revealing a glimmer of hope beneath. The mysteries surrounding her daughter's death, the pain that had lingered for years, suddenly felt like a distant memory, eclipsed by the love that still tethered them together. "Will you forgive me?" Margaret whispered, her heart laid bare before the spirit of her daughter. "Always," Emily replied, her smile radiant. "Forgive yourself too. It's time to let go." In that moment, Margaret understood. The weight of her regrets began to lift, replaced by the warmth of acceptance and love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the cemetery, she realized that the journey of healing was just beginning, one that would intertwine her fate with Lily's, Emily's, and the threads of their shared past, forever binding them together in a tapestry of love, loss, and redemption.